Welcome back to Learning to Fly, our series on creating learner-centered classrooms. In today's video, we're going to explore the importance of trusting our young learners to work independently while also providing the necessary support. So let's dive in and discover how we can remove the shackles and foster independence in our classrooms. Today's keyword is trust. As teachers, it's crucial that we strike a balance between scaffolding and support and releasing control. We want to create an environment where students feel empowered to take ownership of their learning. So how can we achieve this balance? First of all, we need to start trusting our learners. Let's explore some practical ideas together. One strategy is peer teaching. Encouraging students to teach and learn from each other not only reinforces their understanding, but it also cultivates a sense of responsibility and cooperation. Try implementing regular peer teaching sessions where students take turns sharing their knowledge and skills with their classmates. Today's activity is a way of getting students to take responsibility for something that they feel confident about. A few weeks ago, we looked at mini passion projects where students researched and presented on a topic of interest to them. You can do something similar as a peer teaching activity. Invite students to teach their classmates something new. This could be something that they have learnt themselves, like playing a simple tune on a recorder or teaching them a clapping rhyme. It could be a hobby or a skill that they have, maybe even something practical like tying shoelaces for younger children. If your students speak different languages, you could have them teach their peers a few words or phrases in their language. Give students time to think about what they want to teach and how they can teach it. They may need some support with choosing the best way to present the activity or skill, but these are things that you can discuss together. They can also test out their teaching procedure with one student first and see how it works. You could also have them teach each other English vocabulary. Invite each pair or group of students to choose 10 words that they want to learn in English. They look these words up, or you can provide them, making sure that they have the correct spelling, pronunciation and meaning. They need to find a way to teach these words to the class using whichever methods they like. Peer assessment is also a great activity that fosters independence. You could ask students to assess each other's written work. With peer assessment, it's essential that students know what to focus on. For example, you might want them to focus on the ideas rather than the language. Or you may want to check their use of a particular grammar structure or some key vocabulary. You could provide a checklist that students can use to see if the work meets the success criteria, but make sure it only has a few items on it. We don't want students writing in red pen all over each other's work. You'll also need to model how to assess a piece of work with the class. Display a model text with some errors on the board and invite students to say what they think is good about it and then what could be improved. Use your checklist to focus on these areas and go through it with the class. Here's a tip for reducing support. Make scaffolding visible for those who need it. Display visual aids, anchor charts, reference materials, anything that will provide enough support during the task. This allows students to access this support when necessary, but it also encourages them to gradually rely less on them, so they only use them if they need them. By having these visual aids readily available, students can refer to them independently, which also builds self-reliance, but it also gives them the scaffolding they need. Now, as we're nearing the end of this series, it's time to start releasing control and handing it over to our students. It can be challenging for us, but it's crucial for fostering independence. As we've seen throughout this series, it's better to gradually delegate decision-making power to your learners. Start with small choices such as selecting learning materials or choosing a group dynamic. We've been doing this since day 1, and now we're on day 18, so hopefully it won't be such a big deal by now. By involving students in decision-making processes, we're demonstrating our trust in their abilities. We've been gradually increasing the level of autonomy as students become more confident and responsible. But if your students aren't there yet, don't worry. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day or 18 days. Finally, the way we structure our lessons can have a big part to play in how much independence our learners are given. If we're still using a traditional PPP approach, it's likely that at least some of the lesson is taken up by teacher-directed learning, for example, explanations or whole class drilling or practice activities. Perhaps we need to change our approach entirely. After all, a teacher-led classroom doesn't really show any trust in our learners. If we don't trust our learners to take responsibility, they won't trust themselves. So we need to start giving them opportunities to develop this responsibility. We can learn a lot from agile workplace approaches. For example, with older learners, particularly in secondary school, you could give them a series of sprints that they have to complete over the course of a week. Or if you only see them twice a week, maybe it's a 2-week period. Make sure that students know what work they need to complete in the time frame. But then, what they do each lesson is up to them. They have to write down their plans for what they will do at the beginning of each lesson, and at the end of the lesson they can reflect on how well they've managed, how much they've managed to complete. You could have a daily stand-up where students briefly share what they've done and what they've learned that lesson. And of course, you could take an inquiry-based or project-based approach. While these approaches aren't always student-centred, they usually include plenty of group work and cooperative learning. Start off with a structured inquiry like the ones in my Inspiring Inquiries resource packs. These are more teacher-led and they're highly structured, which enables the teacher and students to get used to the approach before opening up to a less structured type of project. Now remember, there are just 3 videos to go. Come back next week for the next one in the series.